Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. It's been a minute since I've uploaded a video, and I hope that you are doing really well. Today I want to discuss an idea with you called psychopathology as an adaptive response. When we think of the nature of the self, we have to think of it as being somewhat fluid, right? It moves in relation to its situation, it moves in relation to its psychological development. We can understand psychopathology in relation to the way that our psyche moves in relation to the stressors in the world. We adapt to the stressor and we mount a response pattern that is relatively stable, and that adaptive response is supposed to protect us. This informs the structure of the psyche, of the persona. And interestingly, I have studied these different dynamic processes, and we've talked about that a little bit on this YouTube channel. In this video, I want to just sort of discuss this idea that normal exists on a continuum. For example, when we discuss something we would call psychopathology, we're always dealing with an extreme that would be dysfunctional in the world, that would kind of interfere with your ability to really function and have successful relationships, or maybe work, for example, or do well in school, for example. But I ask a very interesting question, and I want to know, what is normal? I believe normal exists on a spectrum associated with the contextual environment and relational environment. So we have a context, right, by which we express our affects, our emotions. So within the context of maybe a loved one dying, we should display symptoms associated with depression. We should grieve. We should feel pain associated with the loss of a loved one. Now, when we think about, for example, a context for maybe taking a drug, so we have drugs that actually stimulate brain systems, different kinds of brain systems. Therefore, they result in changes in the affects, the intensity of affects. So it would be a normal response, for example, if someone were to smoke marijuana, to become maybe kind of playful, right? We know that there is a response to THC, or cannabinoids, that bind to receptors in the dopaminergic system that can engage play, right? So that would be a response to maybe a chemical. So think about all these interesting response patterns associated with the self-other, the self-environment, as well as chemicals, food, sleep, etc. So we have this ability to move. We have this fluidity. I believe mental health is really an ability to be able to maintain a sense of self while broadening, really, that stress tolerance window. Okay? And we have this ability to really tolerate uncertainty as human beings, because we are the most adaptive and most intelligent and most social, really, animal that exists. And it's very exciting to broaden that scope of tolerance for uncertainty. So I believe that psychopathology is always representing extremes, right? Extremes in nature that have failed to be adaptive. So for example, if you're unable to focus at school because you are temperamentally creative, maybe, and very extroverted, there's a developmental window associated with your need to actually first engage in exploratory and social behavior in order for you to find sitting in a classroom adaptive. So ADHD diagnoses can be associated with hyperactivity, that is the need to move around, right? Or inattention, which is essentially associated with creativity and lower trait conscientiousness or daydreaming. So we have these sort of response patterns. People inherit temperaments, they inherit tools, tools of ancestral living, as my favorite affective neuroscientist Iacobucci articulates. He says that we inherit endophenotypes, or tools for living. So our tools for living have to be adaptive. And ideally, they need to be adaptive early in life. And if they're not, enters psychopathology, enters diagnoses. So, in my view, based off of my integrative psychiatric model of care, I believe that we can understand what is normal only relative to our environment as well as ourselves. And we have to understand that dynamic pattern of relating, that dynamic pattern of responding as individuals to our environment. But really, that early psychosocial environment, those attachment processes that really undergird everything that is higher cognition in human beings. So I get very excited about thinking about this model and trying to apply this model within an alternative and complementary approach to delivering holistic psychiatric care. So what we do is we try to understand behavior within its context. We ask, why are we behaving the way that we are? What in the world are we trying to get? What are we looking for? What are we running away from? It could be any numerous psychodynamic patterns, but there are underlying emotional needs that express themselves in fundamentally adaptive ways. And then only after some time do they become maladaptive. And it's interesting to consider all the different ways we might contextualize maladaptive behavior. Cluster B personality, cluster C personality, cluster A, schizoid, schizoaffective, bipolar illness, bipolar spectrum, autism, autistic spectrum. Psychiatry is just so vague, and there's all these clusters of symptoms that overlap. So we have to find out, when is the diagnosis most useful? It only becomes useful when we use it as a tool to try to move forward into a life that can manage those stressors, manage those windows of intolerance, to broaden them to windows of tolerance. And I'm excited about that vision because I know that you can grow. You can expand that window. And who knows what you could see outside of that window that could broaden who you are and who you could be. I encourage you to do it, and I hope you found this interesting. See you soon. Bye.